So, what if the thing that you're most proud of, your drive, your resilience, your capacity to just keep going, what if that thing, the very characteristic that has produced every result you point to as evidence of your capability, is actually your nervous system running on a 30-year-old emergency protocol? Let's just pause on that for a minute because I want to say something to you that the systems around you, the medical system, the education system, the corporate system, the wellness industry, they have a structural disincentive to say, you did not develop high performance. You were selected for it, rewarded for it, and then quite systematically, you were trained to confuse it with your identity. And look, I know that because I did exactly that for 28 years. I'm Dr. Jen Draper. I spent nearly 3 decades inside medicine as a general practitioner, watching the architecture of what was happening to my patients, my colleagues, and eventually myself before I left and walked away. This is Series 2 of Programming Patterns and Personality. If you watch Series 1, you already know the nervous system makes sense. Behaviour makes sense. You are not broken. This series goes to the next layer. Not what the patterns are, but where they came from and what it actually takes to change them. Today, the first thing, the thing that most self-development content refuses to say directly. I call it the architecture of high performance. So here is the mechanism. In the early relational environment, childhood, the family system, school, the nervous system is performing a continuous, sophisticated threat assessment. Not consciously, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, it's not yet online in the way that it eventually is when we're adults. But the assessment that it's running at this stage is, what does safety look like here? For most of the high performers I've worked with, and for myself, if I'm going to be honest with you, which is sort of the whole point of this series, the answer is that the body learned some version of this. Safety looks like being impressive. Safety looks like being useful. Safety looks like never needing anything. As I mentioned in episode 0, my father was an immigrant who worked extraordinarily hard to blend in. He was impressive. He was useful. He showed me what safety looked like through those exact strategies, and I absorbed every bit of it. So now I want to be really careful because sometimes this is where people misinterpret the work that I'm doing. I am not saying your parents were bad people. I'm not saying my father was a bad man. I am not saying that your childhood was traumatic in the dramatic sense. I am saying that the nervous system of a child for whom attachment is biologically equivalent to survival, that nervous system learned the rules of the environment with extraordinary precision. So when love was reliable but calibrated to the level of performance, and when approval came with conditions, when the household ran smoother, when you were competent, invisible, or strong, then the nervous system filed that away. And the lizard, the oldest part of your brain, the brainstem, the limbic system, the amygdala, the structures that process threat and safety faster than conscious thought by a blink of an eye, the lizard learned these rules. And then the strategy worked because your teachers praised it, your schools selected for it, workplaces rewarded it, the medical training system, and I'm going to mention medicine specifically because it's the most extreme environment that I know for this pattern, and I'm very familiar with medical training. It didn't just reward the override, it actually required it. Just getting a little bit of a flashback to those professors. So I know that I'm not broken. And I know I was extremely well adapted to my environment, which I'm sure that you are as well. The problem is that that adaptation and being healthy are not one and the same thing. So I recall a patient who was a physician, actually, which is quite relevant, and she came in presenting with what she called chronic fatigue. Immaculate test results. Technically, nothing wrong, everything within the flags. And I asked her the question that I had started asking everyone at that point in my career: when did you last genuinely feel rested? And she thought about it for a moment and then she answered, I don't think I've ever felt rested. I just feel that there's been times in my life when I've been slightly less tired. Now, she was only 34 years old and she had not yet had burnout. She had just never, ever not been in a state of low level physiological emergency. So I just want to pause for a minute and explain what I mean by physiological emergency. I mean that the physiology of her system perceived that it was an emergency. Everything was always urgent. It was, bang, bang, bang. Got to make those very binary decisions quickly, right now. And that perception came from her internal thoughts, not that she was being chased by lions. And the point is that the body cannot tell the difference between what is physically real and what comes from the thoughts that we generate. So even if those thoughts are within our subconscious patterning, then our body can't tell the difference and it is preparing for an emergency to get out of there. So with this particular lady, the burnout, when it came, and of course it did come, it was about 2 years later, it wasn't a sudden collapse. It was just the body finally saying, that's it, terminating the contract that had been running on override for 3 decades. She hadn't actually burned out. She had just been trained to run on empty and call that energy. So medicine trains brilliant people to override their nervous system in the name of performance. Every doctor who's watching this already knows exactly what I mean. And this isn't a criticism of medicine. It's just an observation about what the training installs. Now, in series 1, I talked about patterns and personality. Patterns, which is what we observe in behaviours. Personality is how we've labelled it. The individual who's always the competent one in the room, who never asks for help, who functions at a level that makes everyone around them assume that they are fine. So we call that personality. We call it a driven, resilient, high-achieving personality. But there is a third P, and it's the one that just changes the perspective on everything, and that is programming. I called it nervous system in series 1, but let's go with the P theme. It's programming. Because patterns describe what we observe, personality describes how we've labeled it, but programming describes where it actually came from. And here is the distinction that I want you to carry into every episode that follows. Personality implies that you arrived. Programming implies it's been installed. If it is personality, it is thought to be yourself, by yourself, to be relatively fixed. You manage it. You build coping strategies around your personality. You mention it on the third date as a disclaimer. Yes, I tend to have foot-in-mouth disease. If it is programming, the lizard learned that certainty equals safety. And if the elephant is still carrying the imprint of conditional love, and if the monkeys have just been constructing justifications for survival responses that they didn't actually choose, then it's updatable. Not through willpower directed at the monkeys, but through a recalibration process that reaches the lizard and the elephant. And just a quick backtrack in case you haven't comprehended the monkeys, elephant, and lizard metaphor. The vast majority of your brain is made up by the elephant, with the lizard there. Lizard being the threat, fear response, the elephant being the subconscious programming that keeps us in these nice, regular rhythms. It's the stories that we tell ourselves. And Everyone's fairly familiar with the monkey mind, where you've got your logic and your emotion, asking questions back and forth, and that's that conscious chatter that you have, that self talk in your mind, wherein you feel that these are the riders, these are in control. But we all know that monkeys can't drive an elephant. So the elephant and the lizard is actually where the programming is in residence in your brain. So I just want to end by saying you really didn't burn out. You were trained by your early environment and by the systems that selected you and those reward structures that praised you to be running on a program that was just never designed to be sustainable. And that program is not your personality. It is your programming, which means it can be rewritten. And that means that is the secret to undoing the burnout, if that's where you're at now. So, in the next episode, we will look at the moment that arrives for most high performers, somewhere in their mid 30s to mid 40s, wherein the strategy stops generating safety and it starts generating this feeling of depletion. I call this the architecture of override. Now, if all of this is landing, not as information but as recognition, please subscribe to the channel. This series is not going to be about more information, it's actually a reckoning. And in the next episode, we will continue. I'm Dr. Jen Draper. I'll see you there.